So, I've made it no secret that I feel that 2018 has not been the best year for the movies. I'll go into way more detail about all that, in January when I do my best, worst, and meh lists. But to be generous, let's say that the year has been disappointing, and many of the films falling into that disappointing category. And one of the things I have found the most disappointing is that so far, up until tonight, there hadn't been that film that just popped. That little film that looked good, was good, and yet was also that magical word that that has kind of eluded a lot of films this year, and that is entertaining. There hasn't been a Molly's Game or Their Finest or Miss Sloane or Table 19, and that's one of the things I really loved about doing these videos and doing all these reviews, is seeing these films that are small, quiet, unassuming movies that have a lot of heart to them and are also entertaining. And again, I think entertaining is the term and the ingredient that's been missing from just so many of the movies I've watched this year. I've seen movies that are pompous. I've seen movies that are important. I've seen movies that believe they have a lot to say, and maybe they do, I don't know. But the magic word is they haven't been entertaining. They haven't been films that you enjoy watching. And I think that's a key ingredient in making a really good movie. I mean, Citizen Kane, as I've said 100 times, is not a film that you come home at night after a long day of work and go, I'm going to watch this to unwind. Oh, what a day. Let's watch Citizen Kane. But when I do watch it, I'm entertained by it. The characters are fascinating. The story is interesting. The way it's shot is brilliant. So even though, a ponderous, more intellectual, artsy film, it's still entertaining. And that has been, again, the key ingredient that I feel has been missing from so many movies this year. So what a breath of fresh air it is to see this movie. This is a movie I was worried about because the trailers looked good. And I've seen a lot of movies this year whose trailers looked good. And then you see them and, kind of the things I've just talked about. And this one, the trailer looked good. And I'm happy to say the movie is good. The movie's very good. Not perfect, but definitely good. So I feel like a breath of fresh air has, kind of wafted through my old car. I feel like I'm finally breaking the endless stream of C films that I've been sitting through the last couple of weeks. So let's have a conversation about Green Book. So, if you haven't heard of it, this is the story of an African-American musician, and they said his name a billion times in the movie, and now that I'm here, I cannot remember what his name was. It's an actual person. Don Slott, I think. Now, it's funny, like I said, I've just seen the movie, they said it a billion times, and now I can't remember it. Who is going on tour in the Deep South in the 60s. So he hires as his chauffeur, not so much a chauffeur, but just his driver, and kind of not really a bodyguard, but it's kind of what he does, hires an Italian guy from the streets, guy from Brooklyn, to kind of be his driver and his, again, not so much his bodyguard, but to basically be a problem solver, because he knows he's going to run into problems down there. So the film doesn't have a strong plot or a central narrative as such. It's more just kind of a series of little vignettes and little interactions between these two characters as they drive around and go on tour. And it's kind of from the setup, from the trailer, from what I've described, you can probably tell what this is. It's the story of two people who aren't alike, and they get to know each other and they become friends. Yeah, that's pretty much it. But the devil is in the details. What makes it work is, number one, the performances. These are two really great actors. The actor playing Dr. Slott, I can never pronounce his first name, and especially with this movie, I don't want to be disrespectful and butcher his name, so I'm just going to call him Mr. Ali, because that's his last name. Mr. Ali is one of those kind of rare actors in Hollywood right now. The guy just has immense screen presence. He can play anything. He can play any type of character and do it 100% convincingly. Hero, villain, educated, street thug. Whatever you want him to play, he can play, and he plays it perfectly. There's a reason this guy's got an Oscar. I've never seen him in a thing where he's given a bad performance. So love him in this. Viggo Mortensen plays the Italian Tony Lip, and gives a really great performance. Viggo Mortensen's one of those actors that everyone thought was going to be big after The Lord of the Rings. They thought he was kind of going to be the next Harrison Ford, and that didn't really work out for him. So it's kind of funny to see that now this kind of big, I want to say it's a comeback. I hope it's a comeback for him, because I think he deserves it, is, playing this character so far removed from Aragorn. He's this fat, slovenly Italian, but he's really good and really charming and has kind of that old school Italian charm. Even though I gotta say, and I'm joking a little bit here, it bugged me a bit that he's not actually Italian. That he's not actually Italian, and he's playing when he's, hey, oh, what's the matter? Oh, don't worry about it. Dagos, pardon my language. I am Italian, just putting that out there. So that bugged me a little bit, but the fact of the matter is, he played such a good character and played such a lovable character. They had a very odd couple, Abbott and Costello relationship. Mr. Ali was the prim and proper, classically trained and speaks with perfect diction, and Viggo Mortensen, is the slovenly, kind of guy, and they had a neat chemistry kind of going back and forth. What I also really liked about this movie, and again, because it's based on a true story, that helps. But in terms of a narrative and making something old and an old story that we're telling in a new way, is I like the dynamic. Again, I am Italian, and my family is Jersey Italian. All right? So even though I was not raised in Jersey, I recognize a lot of the stuff of Italian families and that old school kind of Italian mentality. And I can tell you, just from the few of my older relatives who I knew for a very brief period of time before they passed on, Italians, old school Italians from that era, could be some of the most racist people. And they kind of show that in this movie at the very beginning, when they have a couple of black guys over fixing the plumbing, and his wife, Viggo Mortensen's wife, gives him lemonade, and he throws the glasses away. You know, but here's the so that's interesting already. So taking that dynamic and putting them together. But what also makes it interesting is that when you think about it, and when you kind of understand the history of both, the African American experience and the Italian American experience are not entirely dissimilar. Now, clearly there are some major dissimilarities, but in terms of their general acceptance, in terms of, you know, some of their issues, you know, there is a common ground there, you know, and this film does a great job. But again, without getting up on its soapbox, it'd be so easy for this movie to get up on its soapbox about everything, but it doesn't. It simply lets the situations play out. Without getting up on the soapbox, it shows just kind of how similar both of these characters and their backgrounds are. You know, that wonderful thing of we're not that different when you really look at it. You know, there's a scene very early on in the concert, before they get down to the South, where Mr. Ali is about to give a concert, and he's telling Viggo Mortensen's character, he's telling him, after this concert, we have to go to these receptions, and I'm going to be introduced, and they're going to introduce you, and they're not going to be able to say your last name because it's too complicated, you know, or, you know, the way you talk isn't right, you know, for them. So, again, without getting up on its soapbox, this movie very subtly shows, look at what this guy is telling this Italian American, and how is that different from what people are telling the African Americans at the same points in history, or even now, you know? And I really think that is so clever, and again, so subtle and well done. I also really like, from Mr. Ali's character, and this is again something going back to his really brilliant performance in this. It captures the subtlety of just what a sad life he must have had, and the isolation he must have felt. They deal very, very strongly with this concept that he's trained to be a classic pianist. You know, he doesn't know a lot of, the what would be considered the black culture. You know, he's kind of trying to be accepted by the white culture, but that has alienated him from his own culture. And he has this great scene in the rain where he's, saying, if I'm not white enough, and I'm not black enough, and I'm not man enough, what am I? And that is such a perfect encapsulation of what so many of performers like him had to go through. Just off the top of my head, thinking, I remember hearing that some of the things Sammy Davis Jr. had a problem with. Or, going way back to the 1920s, Burt Williams, when he was with the Ziegfeld Follies. He was accepted by a wider audience, but he was forever isolated from his own kind. And that's got to be a very lonely life. And this film captures that loneliness and that, that just all that melancholy in very subtle ways. And subtlety is the name of the game for the big messages in this. Now, is this movie perfect? No, it's not. There are some things I had some problems with. It dips a little bit too much into the racism. And what I mean by that is, there's a scene where Viggo Mortensen's character goes and gets some Kentucky Fried Chicken because they're in Kentucky. And he gives it to Mr. Ali's character. He's like, here, try it. And he's like, I've never had fried chicken. He's like, what do you mean talking about? All you people like fried chicken. All you da-da-da. And he finally eats the fried chicken and likes it. So there's this kind of uncomfortable thing of, it almost feels like it's saying, stereotypes are true. I guess. I don't know. I don't know. Something about that scene made me a bit uncomfortable. I also have to say, again, from my perspective as an Italian, Irish, Italian, Polish, but mostly the Italian, they played into a lot of the Italian stereotypes pretty hard. Viggo Mortensen's character is always fucking eating. Like, to a point where you almost felt like you were watching a parody of a film where he's doing this. It reminded me of scenes from, like, The Naked Gun. There's a scene where he's in his hotel room, he gets an entire pizza, folds it up like a calzone, and takes a bite. It's like, seriously? It's like, seriously, not on. So yeah, there are some things in this movie I had some problems with. Just little things that made me uncomfortable. But, here's the thing. Going back to kind of the racist stuff. It bothered me in the moment. It bothers me a little bit when I think about it. But in the greater picture, it fit the story. Because the story is not about a bigot suddenly becoming open-minded. Tony Lip is a certain age, from a certain culture, from a certain time. And he's not going to change his ways or change his mind instantaneously. And even if, when he does finally come around and, they do become friends, he's not going to be perfect. He's still going to have some of these things. So it fit the character at that time, at that point in the movie. There's, like, for instance, it does show his character growth. He doesn't change huge. There's not a huge wake-up moment. It's a gradual thing over time. There's these moments when he's in there with his other Italian buddies, and they keep calling black people and, the doctor specifically, they keep calling him eggplant, which I didn't know was a racial slur, And at the very end of the film, Tony's sitting down to dinner with his family and his brother. So he's like, hey, did the eggplant drive you nuts? And he looks at him with this visit, don't call him that. With this very... And I think that's another thing, and this is one of the things that made me very proud about this movie. One of the things that made me very proud is... because that is another very Italian thing. Italians... and old school Italians, they can be racist. I had a great uncle who said some things in front of me that I was just like, holy crap. But the other thing Italians are, and you can take this to the bloody bank, Italians are loyal. And when you become their friend, God help anybody who fucks with you. And that is a very Italian thing. And it showed that, and showed it not in a godfathery way, not in these kind of ways that a lot of these things have been portrayed in films and whatnot up to this point. It showed it in a very recognizable... I recognize that moment from my family, myself. That thing of don't talk that way about so-and-so. They say, kind of giving an example, Frank Sinatra was a lot like that. Is that he could tease Sammy Davis Jr. because that was his friend. But if anybody else said it, or the great story of, him going out to dinner with Della Reese, and, she was performing at the club, and, Frank was there, and then that she got done, she was going to sit down to dinner, and the owner said, you can't eat here. Negroes can't eat here. And Frank said, what, she can perform here, but she can't eat here? Well, then I'm not performing here, and I'm not eating here, because I don't eat places that don't accept my friends. And that is, again, very Italian. And I like that. The movie, and I'm talking from my point of view, from stereotypes I've seen of my culture and whatnot in films. This movie touched on the stereotypes, but it also got the facts right. So I guess, you can go one or the other. This is just a really good movie. And a movie I want to watch again. And I haven't been able to say that about a lot of movies this year, even ones that I've liked. You know, and again, no soapbox. No, it didn't feel heavy-handed at any point. It felt like two people from very different backgrounds, but with a lot of similarities in those backgrounds, meeting and gradually developing a very organic friendship. The friendship felt real. So when it has the payoffs, you're like, yeah, that feels earned. So yeah. I want to explain this. So the Green Book of the title, as it turns out, was a book that was published that basically told black people where they could stay when they traveled, what hotels they were allowed to stay at. What a fucking... God, you forget. You know, we're fucked up in this country right now. I'm going to get political for just 1 second, so please bear with me. We're pretty fucked up in this country right now. But sometimes I think it pays for us to kind of see a movie like this and go, we were a lot more fucked up and not that long ago. We've come a pretty good distance from that barbaric shit. Granted, we're not where we should be, and I think we've taken quite a few steps back in the last couple years. I wonder when all that started. Anyway, but I mean, we don't do that anymore, thank God. And it does make you very ashamed to kind of go, oh, fuck, man, we did that. God, fuck us, man. So yeah, so that's what the Green Book of the title was. I was very curious about that. Anyway, I want to wrap this up. It's kind of been a rambling review. It hasn't been one of my more cohesive ones. I feel like I'm kind of all over the place. Final grade for the Green Book. I'm going to say an A-. I'm going to say an A-, just because, again, there were a few little things in there that made me a little uncomfortable, or I didn't feel were handled quite the right way, but they served a purpose in the story. So even though they made me uncomfortable, which they probably should have made me uncomfortable, it's probably why they were in there. But a really good movie, a really well-written, very subtle, and above all, entertaining. This movie had a point. It made its point. It was still a poignant, interesting, well-done movie, and I was entertained while I was watching it. So I can't really ask for more than that. So I give the Green Book a big thumbs up. Please, please, please go see it. Please, I'm begging. You need to see this movie. It's a really great one. So yeah. All right. So I really wanted to see that film. I'm glad I did. So good way to wrap up a weird week. So I only got 2 days of work this coming week, and then I'm off for Thanksgiving, and there are some big films coming out Thanksgiving weekend I want to see. So we're going to be back with more of these. So until next time, please drive safe, and I will see you at the movies.